At the dinner table, a little boy sits silently, his fork playing a sad little tune on his plate. With each shove of peas and mashed potatoes, he concocts an elaborate escape plan. His sister is basking in the warm glow of attention, sharing giggles about her day, while his brother gets a heroic round of applause for acing his last test. But him? A quick word from him and the room thickens like molasses, transforming into an awkward silence sharp enough to cut glass. His presence feels like a spot of vinegar in a sweet family recipe. This little guy isn't necessarily hated in a blatant way. There are no outward insults or physical jabs, just a muffled atmosphere, a deflating energy. It's a nuanced dance of dismissal, shown in twisted smiles and resigned sighs that whisper, "Not now." Being the unloved child is like being a ghost in a house filled with laughter. They say a child's heart is shaped by the warmth or coldness of home. In his case, it's an icy sculpture of solitude and discomfort, reflecting how he feels like an uninvited guest in his own family. Hey everyone, welcome to Psychologist Jeep, the quiet corner of the internet for the overthinkers, the silent observers, and the kids who grew up feeling a little too different, a little too unwanted. Here, we don't fix broken people, because you were never broken to begin with. We just learn to understand the chaos, the loneliness, and the strange beauty that comes from being the one who didn't fit. If you've ever been the kid who sat at the edge of the playground, wondering why the world felt louder for you than for everyone else, you're not alone anymore. Here, your thoughts are safe, your weirdness is sacred, and your story still matters. So before we begin, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who once felt unseen, and drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, and maybe, which part of you the world never understood. Let's explore with Psychologist Jeep. We all arrive in this world seeking refuge, snuggled under a blanket of belonging. A child comes just as a sponge, soaking up love, affection, and every "I love you." But imagine that sponge soaking up only hostility and disdain instead. It's not just disappointing, it robs the child of their sense of worthiness. Feeling unloved is a hefty suitcase, but feeling unworthy? That's like dragging a boulder through life. It molds not just moments but identities, whispering, "You don't deserve good things" every time they stumble upon kindness. John Bowlby, the attachment theory guru, studied how kids form bonds, and boy did he uncover some eye-opening stuff. Warm, affectionate relationships mean a swagger-filled walk into adulthood. Cold connections? They create flinching adults, perpetually ready for the inevitable disappointment around every corner. They carry that scar tissue into all facets of life, even as they smile on the outside, appearing as normal as anyone else. The deeper irony? They often remain oblivious to the subtle disdain they've experienced. To them, parents aren't just parentals, they are the entire reality. Those tender beings warp the truth into a painful pancake flip. If they're unhappy with my existence, it can't be them, it must be me. They're wired to preserve that fragile bond, putting the blame right back on themselves. This dangerous internal dialogue morphs rejection into an accepted identity, birthing a grown-up full of questions that fester silently. Am I good enough? Am I lovable? Will I always struggle to connect? Such endeavors become tangled in the mind like holiday lights, impossible to unravel. The comparison game is brutal when you feel like the shadow in a family of sunflowers. The hated child becomes an unintentional spectator during the family talent show, noticing who gets the chocolates, the hugs, the good-natured ribbing. For them, the applause turns to crickets, and the once happy roars transform into stifled sighs as soon as they chime in. It's not always on display, but it's felt deeply. The less warmth, less eye contact, and fewer high fives are like thumbs poking into their resolve, saying, "You're a little less than." In such a whirlwind of dynamics, uninvited thoughts spring to life. Every piece of criticism from a teacher, every quiet moment from friends, and every grumpy day from a partner is absorbed as proof of a long-standing belief: I am not wanted. Developmental psychology backs this notion up, showing that kids raised in this constant shade learn to expect it everywhere. Itchy sweaters that never feel quite right. Through this lives the bittersweet truth that even in households painted bright with laughter, a child can feel as lonely as a cloud drifting in a blue sky. Children experiencing parental rejection often find themselves grappling with low self-esteem and elevated levels of anxiety and depression. The cherry on top. This rejection doesn't just hurt feelings. It rewires the brain's ability to decode social cues. Essentially, the scorned child evolves into an adult with a knack for detecting rejection even in the friendliest of environments. It's like wearing a pair of glasses that only showcase the shadows of their past. From the wreckage of childhood, many of these rejected kids craft protective strategies psychologists have dubbed compensatory tactics. Imagine someone taking the impossible leap to excellence, thinking that if they shine brightly enough, love will magically appear. Others might turn into passionate people pleasers, bending over backward to fit whatever mold might win them a pat on the back. And then there are those spirited rebels who adopt a "you can't hurt me because I'm already off the path" attitude, shoving away anyone who dares to get close. Yet, underneath these masks lies a common wound: I wasn't accepted for who I really am. What's troubling is that many of these kids confuse their coping strategies with their true selves. They often trudge through life, hefting the weight of roles they never intended to play. The real kicker: they often mute their pain, fearing that giving voice to their hurt will only cement their feelings of defectiveness. But trust me, that unspoken pain doesn't just vanish into the ether. It lurks in the shadows and influences every decision they make. Unsurprisingly, a rejected child may find themselves drawn to partners who replicate their childhood dynamics, those who are critical, withholding, or dismissive. It's akin to an unintentional love affair with the past, an emotional déjà vu, if you will. The brain stubbornly sticks to the familiar, even if it's as comforting as sandpaper. This tendency is how the cycle perpetuates, echoing across generations like a sad song on repeat. No one actively wants it, but unhealed wounds often form the foundation of new family trees. Now, let's turn our gaze to biology. Rejection sends a thrill of threat through a child's nervous system, cranking up the release of stress hormones like cortisol. Over the years, this relentless stress shapes their neural pathways like a sculptor with a chisel. Neuroscientific research has discovered that chronic rejection in childhood is tied to a hyperactive amygdala, the fear factory, and a sluggish prefrontal cortex, where emotional regulation hangs its hat. So, what does this mean in the day-to-day arena of life? It typically means those poor souls grow up with an antenna finely tuned to sniff out even the slightest hint of rejection. They may react like an over-vibrant firework to trivial slights, not out of drama, but simply because their nervous system learned to expect the worst. Chaos becomes their old friend, while serenity feels like a stranger. Here's the kicker: sometimes the hated child doesn't wear visible scars. A family may appear picture perfect, filled with birthday balloons and vacation snapshots, yet inside, they wrestle with feelings of invisibility. This internal struggle can sting even more than outright hostility, leaving them with nowhere to point fingers of accusation. They begin to second-guess themselves, drowning in doubt and wondering whether they are just melodramatic or too sensitive. Ironically, this lack of clear validation often deepens their emotional scars rather than healing them. Gaslighting can sneakily entwine itself into family dynamics without a single malicious intent. This often leaves a residue of self-doubt that clings to individuals as they grow up. So even if they seem successful, with fulfilling relationships and families of their own, there's an uncomfortable ache that constantly whispers, "Something isn't quite right with me." Fast forward a couple of decades, and the once hated child is now navigating adulthood, but those shadows never seem to fully dissipate. Now, if you think shedding the label of the hated child is a matter of growing older, think again. It seems those childhood memories have a tenacious grip. They often creep into adult relationships, fueling a fear of abandonment or a magnetism towards those who are emotionally unavailable. It's like getting stuck on a merry-go-round. Round and round you go, continuously second-guessing self-worth, even after nailing that promotion at work. The ghostly echoes of self-talk can be downright brutal. So why do these childhood experiences cut so deep? Simple. Love is not an optional accessory for a child. It's the very air they breathe. Acceptance is their sustenance, and belonging is their safe haven. When these needs go unmet, it's not just a passing ache. It's a quiet suffocation that goes unnoticed, unlike physical injuries that demand attention. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard even defined despair as a soul's illness, stemming from the inability to become one's authentic self. A child branded the hated one learns to internalize dismissal through the form of eye rolls, dramatic sighs, or even the cold silence. Yet, here's an important distinction to grasp. The identity of the hated child isn't the true essence of who they are. It's merely a scar, a lasting mark of past pain, but not the whole body. While those scars carry testimony, they don't have to dictate one's destiny. In fact, the hated child often carries intangible gifts right alongside those wounds. What could be sensitivity morphs into empathy, loneliness sparks creativity, and resilience fuels courage. Throughout history, many artists, thinkers, and leaders transformed tales of rejection into powerful narratives of insight. We've reached a realization: rejections shape our stories, but they don't have to narrate the entire tale. Recognizing this chosen identity is crucial for growth, and yes, breaking the cycle of suffering is absolutely possible. However, this doesn't happen by mere chance. It requires a conscious effort to gain awareness, allowing the adult self to understand the child they once were. This understanding isn't about pointing fingers at parents or drowning in past grievances. It's about seeing the truth of what happened. The magic lies in reparenting, a profound act of offering yourself the patience and love that may have been absent during childhood. It boils down to this: you are worthy, lovable, and you belong. While these affirmations may sound foreign or overly simple, they carry immense weight. By naming your experience, "I grew up as the unwanted one," you signal a significant shift. It's a step toward reclaiming your narrative, giving your nervous system the validation it so desperately craved. The best part? This is only the beginning of a beautifully rewritten story. As the fog begins to lift, that vague sense of shame transforms into a clear wound with a definable cause. Unlike an unidentifiable ache, wounds with a reason can be treated. Studies on trauma highlight a pretty powerful tool. Simply turning chaotic experiences into words diminishes their emotional intensity. By giving our pain a name, that once lonely hurt begins to feel relatable, allowing the adult to see it's not a personal flaw but rather an event they survived. They say attachment theory dictates the way our brains process relationships, especially after early trauma. Rejection wires us to expect more of the same, leaving us in a cycle of doubt. Here's the incredible twist, though: attachment styles aren't set in stone. Through diligent efforts to form positive relationships, like therapy or supportive friendships, one can build something known as earned secure attachment. This means that if you start out doubting love, there's always a chance to relearn it and paint a new picture of connection. Talk about a glow-up for the nervous system. Healing isn't just a walk in the park. It demands a hefty dose of compassion, especially self-compassion. Dr. Christine Neff's research shows that when we treat ourselves with kindness during tough moments, we can keep unwanted emotions like anxiety and shame at bay. For the child who felt unlovable, self-compassion can feel as strange as wearing a penguin suit to a black tie event. After years of being criticized, the act of being gentle to oneself feels revolutionary, like rebelling against a past that didn't know kindness. Remember how the hated child becomes a radar for others' feelings? That sensitivity can turn into a dazzling gift. With healing, that once sharp-edged survival instinct evolves into empathy, intuition, and insight, qualities that make for exceptional friends and leaders. The narrative shifts from being broken to becoming resilient, offering a chance to turn pain into powerful connections with the world around them. The hated child isn't destined to repeat the cycle. They are soaring towards transformation. Then comes the moment when the hated child grows up and, wait for it, becomes a parent. Oh, the irony. Many who faced rejection as kids strive to overflow their little ones with the unconditional love they craved. Some conquer this mission effortlessly, breaking generational curses. But when old wounds resurface, awareness becomes their superhero cape. A parent who pauses to reflect can avoid projecting their past onto their child and choose to break the cycle, marking a crucial moment of growth. Stepping into the realm of the philosophical, let's unload a truth bomb. Rejection stings because we're hardwired for belonging. Science backs up Aristotle's claim that we're social creatures by showing how our brains are designed for connections. The gut-wrenching ache of loneliness hits harder than expected. It's almost like a biological wound. Rejection doesn't just sting emotionally. It cuts deep into our most primal need to belong. The silver lining here is that belonging can be rebuilt. It might not always stem from family roots, but it can thrive through chosen families, friends, or communities that recognize our worth. The transformation shifts from being a victim of past circumstances to creating different, vibrant life narratives. Instead of wallowing in "why was I unwanted?" the healed adult boldly asks, "What kind of life do I want to forge?" This isn't about downplaying pain, it's about integrating it, acknowledging the hurt while refusing to be defined by it. That's the real game changer. Let's dive into a practical guide for the adults who once felt like the most unloved child in the room. First up, awareness journaling. Grab a notebook and jot down those pesky memories of feeling unwanted. Once you've got those feelings down, write the truth below them like, "Hey buddy, it wasn't my fault. I was worthy of love then. And guess what? I'm still worthy of love now." Bam! That's some instant clarity. Next, let's talk therapeutic relationships. Finding a good therapist or nurturing friendships can work wonders on those old emotional scars. These supportive connections act like a safety net, reprogramming your inner nervous system to expect acceptance, not rejection. Imagine the comfort of being around people who cheer you on like you're the star of a reality show. Yes, honey, you deserve that vibe. Of course, if your old family dynamics still feel like they're throwing knives at your self-esteem, time to set some boundaries. Healing isn't about standing in the firing line of rejection and just taking it. Nah. It's about erecting some well-deserved barricades. Whether it's ignoring certain messages or stepping away from family gatherings that feel more like battlegrounds, reclaim your space, my friend. Now let's get artsy. Self-expression is the name of the game. Pick up a paintbrush, write a poem, or strum a tune. Whatever helps you transform that silent anguish into a dazzling masterpiece. This creativity is like turning the volume up on your inner voice rather than squashing it down. Expression is the antidote to all that internal chaos, and it's downright liberating too. Don't forget about compassion practice. Think of it as giving your inner child a warm hug. Every day, speak to yourself like you would comfort a child in distress. You are worthy. You matter. It might feel a tad cheesy at first, but trust me, just changing your self-talk can reshape your identity over time. You're not just reshaping words, you're reshaping your entire narrative. Even if that little boy at the table, feeling invisible, lurks in your memories, here's the kicker. You don't have to stay trapped in that story of rejection. You can rewrite your script. Whether you choose to build a loving family or transform into a visionary, the power is yours. Remember, many have walked this path before you, transforming their unwanted beginnings into tales of triumph and love. So take a moment to acknowledge that little one in you, the boy or girl who craved recognition. Look them in the eye and deliver the message no one else could. You are worthy. You are enough. You belong. Healing kicks off the moment the hated child meets genuine love. Not the borrowed I love yous or conditional flattery, but an unwavering declaration that says, you exist, therefore, you matter. That, my friend, might just be the most powerful lesson of all.